if you want to sort of unify things among your company. So I'll put in a request to have a way to exporting and importing those. It shouldn't be too hard to set up. It would just probably be an XML file like everything else we export and import.
Yeah, I will say this as well, especially on the web connections portion. In Iowa, when Eric was there, when I was there, and when we had a couple of our other team there as well, is just to be able to manage and consistently use web connections. Like, I know that I think I submitted an idea, or someone had an idea about being able to share, and then also to be able to, like in this instance, if you upload them to server, manage them at the server level so you can bring them down or whatever. That's probably overly complex, but
yeah.
I tried to keep the naming conventions relatively consistent, but not everyone follows them, and people make typos on them, and you end up with like 5 of the same web connection, but with just different names.
Yeah, but with the web connections, hang on.
I know you can export web connections and database connections.
Yeah,
I was thinking similar to how you can actually embed a database connection into a workspace, or embed the connection into a workspace. If you could embed the styling of the transformer connections into the workspace as well, that way that they carry through without having to import or export.
I'm honestly shocked they don't already.
Yeah, I was too.
Considering that it's XML, and I guess they must reference something when you create them. It must reference like the color name or something, I suppose.
Yeah, but like I said, this information currently is most likely stored in the registry, and it's kind of it's a combination of I guess do you customize it for yourself, or do you want this appearance to go to other people? And sort of see both sides, because I have a real hatred of the swoopy lines connectors because I find that they just obscure things, and I like my straight lines because I've been using this for the last 25 years, and that's the way people intended it to be made. So so if somebody sent me one and I couldn't unswoopify the lines, I'd be really annoyed. But I think, like he said, maybe if we set something up where it's like a web connection where you could dump this to an XML file and then have it loaded on all the machines within your company, so everybody's looking at things the same way, would make sense, right? As sort of a standard. But yet, you could allow people to still modify it on their own if they really hated that particular color of pink. So, yeah, but stored with the workspace, I'm not sure we could do that. But I'll put in a request, and we'll see what the developers will allow us to do.
Oh, I got a natural pause. We got Mark now. Feel free to chime in. Welcome, Mark. Long time no see. So
hey.
Good.
See everyone.
Yeah, so it's kind of, we're having limited, Harold's having microphone problems, and so we had kind of limited participation, it looks like. So Mark, we're expecting you to step up and ask lots of great questions, or tell us how you're doing things, or give us some advice.
Oh, so it's right here. Yeah, I guess that's what they are doing. Although this is interesting. They do have that. So it's like they're kind of doing a combination, I guess, maybe of both. Where they store a palette color, and then they also store the actual RGB, I suppose.
Well, Eric, I'm looking for tonight's Powerball numbers, hoping you guys could help us out.
Well, FME probably has a randomizer,
yeah,
and that can do that for you.
Oh, Yeah, could you run the statistics on it for the last 100 Powerball races? Give me what you think.
It's supposed to be random, right?
Yeah.
Well, statistically, right, your odds never change
Right.
You
because
do
it's
have
the
the
same
stat
amount of numbers.
calculator, so, you know.
Although if you're that, I don't know, Eric, if you saw the news, if you're that house and there was a house here in Iowa that literally got hit, was it like a car went through the house 3 times in the past 2 years? It's like, I suppose it's probably, you would
Well,
have worse odds of that happening, I suppose, than getting hit by lightning.
maybe. It depends if you live on a T intersection with no controlled stop, right?
Yeah.
They must be Iowa drivers.
That's probably why we have some of the lowest insurance rates in the country, right?
Oh, they could be Arizona drivers if you really want to know.
Yeah, but, well, Mark, you have any questions or anything you want? You got a pretty good panel here. Not me, but talking Bo, Dave, and David, and John, and Carol.
I don't actually have any specific questions. I wanted to come in and see what was going on. Always interested in what Bo does with LRS for FME because I think it's come a long ways in the last 2 years. It was more just coming in to say hi, see what you guys were doing, see if some people had some innovative solutions. So right now we're just doing data manipulation in FME. Nothing too spectacular.
Who are you working for now, Mark?
I'm out at Timmins now.
You're at Timmins, that's right. Yep, I knew you went somewhere. So
I just
Hi,
put
Mark. And are you still in Arizona?
I am. I'm still in Phoenix.
In Phoenix, there. Okay.
So I'm
Good
still
to
out
see you.
here.
Yeah. And
I don't get to answer all of those technical
data, we're
questions
not
now.
doing much different from data manipulation and what have you. So we still have not get the server set up. But the good news is we finally we will assign a project manager after 3 years. We finally assigned a project manager. So we are seriously talking about installing FME server, and we are dying for it for sure.
Good. I hope you guys good luck.
Well, it looks like with the new manager coming along, I hope to see something moving. I do have a few questions. If hey, we have a new newcomer, and so hi, and feel free to jump in. And before that, I have one question to ask to the rest of the panel. I lost my screen, and basically, I was wondering about Kubernetes infrastructure, and for government agencies, Dave, from your experience, and also David, if you know, any other reason, and in what type of infrastructure circumstances people would consider using Kubernetes as infrastructure to install FME server? What advantage we gain by doing that?
Yeah, I don't do much with the server side, so I'm afraid I can't answer that question for you. Although Kubernetes is a way of managing Docker containers, is it not?
So from what I know of Kubernetes is, like, if you're looking at kind of like the ArcGIS Kubernetes type side, is it's more distributive, right? So like instead you can kind of spin up multiple VMs, if you will. Yeah, it's kind of a containerized environment. I have very basic knowledge about it, but from what I've seen on the ArcGIS Online or the ArcGIS Enterprise side, is it looks pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, Kubernetes, right? It's all about similar to Docker, right? And containers for server infrastructure. And Kubernetes is what's supported by Google, and I think Microsoft has joined in on their open source technology for it, so it's cheaper than Docker also. But what it basically gives you in this container structure from an organizational point of view is, think about you're building a Windows OS box and you want to get all the patches, you want to get all hardened, but you don't want to have to do all that manual work over and over again. You create one Windows Kubernetes container, and then you build the subcontainer out of that already has the OS, and then you install ArcGIS Server or you install FME on it. And then say 2 weeks go by or a month go by when Windows updates come out for an organizational level, you apply those Windows updates to one container and everything gets passed down. So you're also not building a bunch of VMs that all have the OS installed and using up space on your hard drives. It's all sort of inherited from the top container. It also allows you to, if FME goes awry or whatever application's running on the subcontainer goes wrong, instead of sitting there troubleshooting it for 8 hours, maybe at some time you say, well, it worked 2 weeks ago. Let's just redo the container from 2 weeks ago. So you go pull that out of storage, you redeploy that, and all your services and everything is back up and running. So it's saving you staff time. It's all about shared infrastructure. It's all about the least amount of maintenance possible. And Kubernetes runs natively in Azure and AWS. So it fits really nicely in their portfolio. And this is all done by code. So you write one big thing of either JSON or whatever language is natively supported by Kubernetes in the cloud environment you're at. And no one's actually sitting there running it. It's just spinning it up and the computer's doing all the work.
Yeah.
I don't know if FME could orchestrate that though, but they do have some other orchestration tools.
I do know that. What is it? Is it Don or Dale? One of them were playing around and working on it.
Yeah, Don's done a little work on that, and I think it was based around automating the firing up of server instances or server engines. So you could have a demand-based server engine system. So say you've got FME server, you've got 2 engines running, but once a month, everybody just nails your service for one reason or another. So you basically could set up an automated way of spinning up more engines to meet the demand. And then once the demand is over, throttling them back down again. And it kind of works with our new server pricing model where you pay by CPU cycle rather than a set cost sort of thing. So it just allows you to sort of load balance.
Yep. Yeah, scale horizontally,
Yeah.
100%. But I mean, that really gets now into the question, right? From architecture perspective is, do you have a dev environment? Does dev need to be spun up between the hours of 5 p.m. and 6 a.m. when you're paying per hour or per minute?
Yeah.
Really doesn't. You could spin it down and spin it back up before everybody else comes back into work. And now you're not paying for the CPU processing. You're only paying for the data storage sitting in the cloud.
Yeah, here at SAFE, we've moved most of our infrastructure, our dev infrastructure, over to AWS. So, I mean, we're a software company with 200 employees, and our IT department's only 3 guys, because we've offered most of it to Amazon. I personally have a stable of about 20 VMs. So gone are the days when my VMs, I had to put Autodesk and ArcGIS and everything on the same computer. No, every major application has its own VM, and in a lot of cases I have a separate VM for different versions as well. So that's very, very handy.
Yeah, the other power with Kubernetes, Bo, and Docker in general, that kind of technology, is it's generally cloud agnostic. So say I'm in AWS right now and I want to move to Azure because there's better pricing, or I want to take advantage of something, or vice versa. Without having to rewrite all your code, Kubernetes or Docker will allow you to basically go spin it up in the other cloud environment without doing any extra. So it has a lot of those transformations built in.
Okay, good. Hey, Harold, I just readmitted you. Come in, please. This time. And I have another question for Dave. So from FME perspective, do you consider linear measure being a dimension or just an attribute?
It's not an attribute. It is in a way a dimension, because the measures are stored on a per vertex basis.
Geometry.
So yeah, essentially, I mean, we don't access them exactly the same way we access a coordinate value, but essentially, yeah, they're just another dimension.
Okay, but this dimension that you can label them, you can name them differently, just like X,
Yep.
Y, Z, it's kind of fixed. But that measure dimension, you can give it whatever name.
Exactly, and you can have as many of them as you want.
Okay.
I'm not sure how much of use that is. I think we might be ahead of the technology a little bit there, because I haven't had a lot of places where we have multiple named measures. But it's actually kind of useful if you're doing it like some sort of analysis within FME, right?
Yeah, we can certainly see it. Some measure along the same route. You can say this is time-based measure. The other is the distance-based measure. And you can add in whatever the resistance, the penalties have you can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, the place where I've used a lot, actually, a lot of this sort of measured stuff is working weirdly enough with video. And now we don't support video as a data type within FME, but it's possible to work with video coupled with, say, something like FFmpeg. So we can bring in, say, a track that you've captured at the same time as you're capturing your videos, and we can use put the timestamps on that track as measures, and then you can say bound your track, and then we can use those timestamps to then go into the video and extract those same timestamps as the video using, say, FFmpeg.
Okay.
So it's a neat use of linear referencing. But yeah, GPS enabled video is essentially it's a linear referenced data set, right? Because mostly it's timestamped.
Mm-hmm.
So I just put in, I think it was this one that I watched this year at the World Fair. I think this is kind of what you're referencing, Dave. The being able to work with video.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome from New Zealand.
All right, boys at Locust, yeah.
So that was a pretty good watch. I think if I remember right, the guy has not really, or he drives people around in like really nice cars or whatever, and he wanted to automate clipping video.
Yeah, I think one of the guys down at Locust does have quite the car collection.
Dave, I have another question for you. So to your knowledge, are there any FME transformers that does not handle linear measure out of the box? Because I remember it used to be that doing the cookie cutting, using area cutter, cutting through a route, it does not cut the measure. And I know that has been maybe 3 or 4 years ago being fixed. So to your knowledge, any significant spatial operation still does not treat measure as a true dimension?
No, I think we're good with measures. I mean, there's something was the one that would change things. The only one I can think of that might modify something like that is if you draped, but I think our drapers will just ignore the measures. And like if there's extra vertices can added, I think they've built that into the infrastructure so that measures just get interpolated as that happens now. And that used to, because I built once a measure interpolator that would interpolate measures, but we found now with the clipper doing that the fastest way to interpolate measures if you have sparse measures on a line is to just clip it by its own bounding box, which actually doesn't clip it at all, but it invokes that measure interpolation routine that's built into the clipper. And then it will fill in all the rest of your measures for you.
Okay, good to know. Yeah.
I've got another question if no one has one. Dave, how do you take the schema coming out of a reader and apply that into a writer using the dynamic schema, but not naming the output FME feature type? So say I wanted to name something, FME feature type underscore clipped or underscore out of boundaries or something, but I want to use the original schema that came from the reader. how do I apply that original schema to a renamed feature?
Let me see, I'm just gonna add a quick writer here so I can make sure I know what I'm talking about. Okay. So if we put that to dynamic mode. Okay. So let's see if I can share my, this is hard to share, one thing can be hard to share. If you bring up FME and you add a feature type to the writer, you can go to the feature type settings, and if you click the dynamic schema definition box, you've got 3 settings there. You've got the schema sources, which is where you pick your schema source. It can either be one of the reader, the schemas for the import, or you can say schema from schema feature if you're working with feature readers or feature writer transformers. That's generally the way I go about it. But then it has schema definition name. So this is separate from your feature type name. But this is the name of the feature type that you want to define the schema. So if you say you have an input schema called area polygons, kind of redundant, but area polygons in, and you want to make an area polygon clip as your output feature type, you'd set the feature type name to area polygon clip. But you'd set the schema definition name to area polygon. And that allows you to sort of, you know, multiply that schema amongst a bunch of output features.
Gotcha. Cool. I'm going to test that, and then I think that's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah, I like working with the dynamic. I like working with the feature readers and the feature writers because you get that schema feature is kind of an explicit, and you can actually examine it and you can manipulate it, which is kind of fun sometimes too. So you're not. It just gives you the maximum flexibility with your schema.
Gotcha. Yeah, the issue I experienced was I can't remember the exact error, but every time I tried to do it, it said the schema wasn't defined for this feature name or something like that. So I couldn't figure out how to reapply it.
Yeah.
So I have one for you. I put it out as an idea. So is it? I don't think it's possible right now. So I think it's still probably going to be an idea. But basically, I have a workspace that I need to be able to, I guess if you want to call it, dynamically expose attributes at runtime. So like a user would pick from like a pick list of what attributes they want to like expose, but I would basically make it like a comma delimited list of attribute names to expose.
How are you going to use these attributes? Is there a transformer? See, the thing
Yeah.
is, at runtime, it's kind of like the workspace is now fixed. You can't manipulate it. And generally, exposing attributes doesn't mean they're there or they're not there. It just means that you can work with them within the workspace, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
basically, I have like let's say like 200 different attributes. So I could I could expose all the possible attributes, but by doing that, obviously, it will decrease performance. It'll make it a lot.
Exposing them doesn't decrease performance. Having them decreases performance. Exposing them will, make if there's hundreds of them, make your workbench run a little slower when you're actually manipulating, editing it. But it doesn't really affect the run, and it's kind of hard to describe. But it's essentially that what runs the workspace and then what you're looking at the workspace are in some ways not exactly the same. So the FME process will work with whatever attributes are read in will be kept all the way through unless you're using an attribute keeper or something to get rid of them all. And they will go out to the writer now, and the writer may have a schema defined that acts as a filter as well. But they're not necessarily the same ones that are defined in the workspace if you define the workspace off of a separate data set with different attributes. So the exposing, if you need a dynamic exposure, it's kind of like what are you doing in the workspace to those attributes that they need to be exposed, or because everything if you just assume they're there in your logic, then at runtime, if they're there, and if they're not, they're not, sort of thing.
Well, if they're not there, they would show up as missing.
Yeah. But
Which I will make a plug as well for was it one of the last safe webinars on validation?
Yeah.
That was good. That talks about, or there's a blog post, I guess, I think it was from Mark back in, was it 2012, that they shared that basically shares the difference between missing, empty,
and null.
and was it null? Yeah.
Yeah. Missing just means that they're not on the feature. And missing only matters in the context of working with the stuff in the workspace. Now, you can like if you have mandatory attributes for an output data set. And I'm thinking of the one I've dealt with the most is Apple's indoor mapping format, where some attributes are mandatory and they're not always on the input data. That's where you can use a null attribute mapper to say, hey, map a missing attribute to a null value, because it has to be defined as null. It can't just not be there. But in that case, yeah, it's a little bit of a test that says, are these attributes actually on the feature? If they're not, well, then we need them, create them, sort of thing. So that, yeah, that's at a runtime it checks to see if they're actually there. But that's almost the only situation I think that actually sort of works with missing attributes. Otherwise, the attributes just by missing means they're not there. And if you're dealing with a flexible situation where it doesn't matter if they're not there or not, then missing really has no context, right? So yeah. I guess I'd dig down deeper and ask, what are you doing with these attributes that you need to expose them dynamically? Because if it's at runtime, you're not actually seeing the workbench, and then it doesn't matter whether they're exposed or not, sort of thing, because you're not working.
Yes, you would know, I guess, if you select what you select before you actually run it. I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think that would be a helpful feature. Think about it. If we have, a workspace, and data might change, the data column might change, the workspace will be pretty generic. And if we can have a separate, let's say a text file, identify the columns or attributes that are relevant for this particular setup run using the same workspace, we can identify saying, hey, these are the list of 5 attributes that I'm concerned, I'm interested in this run. Can we, instead of hard coding them, which will make this workspace not abstract, universal and generic, but just storing those in a text file or spreadsheet file, then dynamically read through that and say, these are the items and columns of concern. Then during runtime, it just pick that up. It's kind of like a parameter you set at runtime at the beginning of the run, but it's making it, because users don't have to mess with it, it's more a configuration file, so to speak, to do it. Is that a pattern a possibility?
Yeah, there's a couple ways of doing that. If there's just a few that you want to work on, you could use attribute copier. The one I've been using the most is substring generator, or no, substring
Concatenator.
Yeah, is
Concatenator, something. No.
Yeah, and I use that within custom transformers a lot, and it's a way of selecting which attributes you want to work on. You could do that and to just a few attributes, or if you want to do a lot of them and you want to set it up inside a spreadsheet or something, is use a couple of schema mappers. So you'd use a schema mapper at the beginning. You'd map and then you'd map the attributes you have to a set sort of names that you want to work with those within in the workspace, and at the end you'd use the same spreadsheet in reverse to schema map them back to their original names, right? So then that would, by using, you just set up your spreadsheet of the fixed names that you're working with and the attribute names that you're working with with this data set, and it would read them, apply them, do the work, unapply them, and away you go. And it'll all be pretty seamless.
Schema mapping could be
I have a question regarding that, Dave. I actually threw a schema mapper versus attribute, a renamer best practices question up on the forum that I linked here in chat just now. And one of the things I noticed with the schema mapper is that you had to manually expose the new attributes that were created by the schema mapper, as well as manually remove the old attributes that the old incoming attributes that were mapped. I was under the impression that this would be more of a, you give it a CSV mapping table and an input data set, and what comes out of this would be your mapped attributes already exposed and populated. Is there something I'm doing wrong there, or am I missing sort of a bigger picture of what the schema mapper is designed for?
Well, in usage, you would define the ones you're mapping into, because those are your fixed attributes that you're going to use throughout the workspace. So that's not a problem. Removing the attributes that have been mapped, I wouldn't bother, just because you just ignore them as you go through the workspace. It's not going to, having them there doesn't add them, and having them not there doesn't get rid of them, right? It's just you're exposing the attributes you actually want to work with within the workspaces. And an illustration of this is, think of the format attributes when you read something like AutoCAD. There's about 8.5 million format attributes that come in on an AutoCAD data set, most of which you neither care about, if they all disappeared off the face of the earth, it doesn't matter to you. They're still on your AutoCAD data as it goes through the process, but if you haven't exposed them on the reader, you don't see them and you don't care about them, and it's all good. And if you're not going back out to AutoCAD, they just disappear into the ether as soon as you hit your writer. So you could do that with these attributes. Through the schema mapper that you're going to be mapping whatever data, whatever attributes you want to this fixed set of attribute names. Those are the attribute names you care about. You work with those. You go back to the schema mapper, and then you would set up some sort of, as your writer, you would have to set up some sort of dynamic where you're actually reading a schema at the beginning and you're taking the schema to the writer off of that. But generally, when you're working with the data in the middle, you don't know what attributes are coming in, and you don't care because you've mapped them to these set names, so you know what you're working with, right?
Interesting.
But I think what John, if I understood John's correctly, because after the mapping, you have the old and new. It seemed to me, if you have old and new, most likely memory have a duplicate version of it, just under a different name. By removing it or keeping or removing attributes, the pipeline will be thinner and will be more efficient. So maybe he was more from that perspective.
That's certainly a thought I had. If we're processing a data set that has 5 million records and 68 fields, and we map 50 of those fields, so now we have 112 fields or whatever. Are we going to notice a performance degradation across, duplicating essentially the number of columns across 5 million data sets?
Yeah, because you're almost going to have a double of the attribute size. Yeah, I'm not sure how to work around that, except that, well, no, because the attribute removers and that stuff, yeah, you'd kind of like to clean them up. I'm wondering though, attribute. Let's try schema mapper. Just want to look at the help. Is there an option to rename the attributes rather than to create new ones?
I saw an option to populate, there's an option to create the new columns and not migrate the values over. There's also an option, I think, to migrate the values over and make the original columns null. But I don't think there's an option to drop or rename the columns, as far as I know.
Okay, well, making the column, yeah, that still leaves the columns. Okay, let me just take and see what I can do here. Let's hook this up to something. Everybody wants to see a CSV file. Okay, go with that one. Next, action. Have an action. Attribute map. Okay, an attribute map is source attribute. Oh, okay. When you're doing your create attribute map, it has the opportunity for this to do a source attribute remove. And that's essentially doing a rename. So if you want to minimize the data size. When you create your attribute map, just pick the remove option, because you know that you're going to be restoring those attributes once you're done with your manipulations. And again, the same thing you would do to remove at the other end as well. So you remove those attributes, the fixed names, and you map them back to the dynamic names. You remove the fixed names, and that way the feature shouldn't change size at all. You're essentially just renaming a set number of attributes to work with, and then you're renaming them back at the end.
So let me open my schema mapper here and see what I have set here, because I thought that where is that? Parameters. No.
Yeah, I'm looking at 2021 here, so not sure if there's a new option or not. Now, there's a little tweak here. If you're looking at your data in the data inspector, and when you're dealing with missing and null attributes, if you're looking at the table view in the data inspector, because the table view has a fixed schema, and it will show that if you don't have an attribute, it may show that as null or missing in the table view. To see what the actual attributes on a feature are, you kind of have to look at the feature view.
So are you able to see my screen here?
Yep.
Okay, so this is my simple test, my mapping spreadsheet, taking field 1 and then appending Nina to the end of the field names. So the output should be the input field renamed _Nina, and this was just to test. So here we've got an attribute creator. We're creating field 1 through 5 with arbitrary values. We're passing this into a schema mapper with that CSV defined. And we do have source attribute remove set, old field and new field. So I believe this is exactly what you're saying, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so the output of this is actually the issue I'm having. It does remove the attributes, but it removes the value. It doesn't remove the column.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was just telling you about. In that visual, the table view here, the table view has a fixed schema. So it doesn't necessarily mean the stuff that is missing is even there. So if we look on the feature information, we notice that if we look for field 5, it's not there.
Okay.
Field 5 Nina is there, but field 5 is not there. So the feature information window shows you exactly what's on the feature. The table view is essentially a view, a fixed schema view of that of those features. So if the attribute is, if it says missing, it does say missing there. If it's missing, it means that attribute is just plain not on the feature at all.
Gotcha.
So it's just a difference in the views.
That's really confusing. But in order to work with the fields, though, they don't. Do these fields show up in a further down transformer if you wanted to do something with them?
No, because that's why you have the option to expose.
And that's the confusing part, is we chose to remove them, but further down the line, unless you explicitly expose the attributes, you can't manipulate them at all. So that's kind of the disconnect or discrepancy that makes this really cumbersome and hard to wield. If you choose to remove the old attributes, then directly out of that, it seems like you should be able to work with the new attributes you just mapped.
Yeah, the problem with that is that we cannot guarantee that CSV file is going to be the same at runtime. See, that's the problem, is whenever you're manipulating the data by an outside dynamic source, which the schema mapping table is, it's a disconnect, and FME goes, well, I don't know what's going to be in this table because it's not, I mean, it's available to me now, and if you use the feature caching, you can do neat things with the feature caches to do automatically populating some exposing and stuff. But ultimately, we can't guarantee that table is going to remain the same in the future or at runtime. So that's why.
I mean, you just identified what I thought the main benefit to the schema mapper is, that the whole point is that CSV should change. That's your mapping table that's going to consistently change. So
Exactly. So how do we reflect that the possibility for change within the fixed schema that we're working with here in the workbench? That's what's the problem our UI guys have sort of run into, in that, you know, we can show you how it is, but that's not necessarily how it's going to be. So that's why we give you the opportunity in the schema mapper to expose new attributes, and anything where we're dealing with dynamic information. That's same with our XML and JSON interpreters, and actually in our Python caller as well, because you can create any sorts of attributes in the Python. We give you the opportunity to expose them. We also have, if you use feature caching, and I don't think you can, I know this is something working on in the exposing parts of the transformers. Yeah. Oh, you can import from feature cache. Okay, perfect. So now you can import the attributes from, you know, this run, because you know this is what it looks like now. And if you're, you know, if you're certain it's going to look like this in the future, yeah, you can bring it. And then actually in these ones where you're mapping from your fields to your fixed fields, you can expose them because you know they're going to be there. That's what you're working on, right? It's when you go back out that you don't necessarily want to expose them, but then you're going to be going out right before the writer, and the writer's going to be using a dynamic schema from the reader. So yeah, this gets complex, but it gets complex because the data may change and the schema may change. So we want to make people sort of cognizant of that, right?
Gotcha.
And it's a difference in the way of working with a batch process versus working with an interactive process. If you're doing stuff interactively, you know your data is here and that's what you're working with. With the batch, we can't make those assumptions, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's my point, or, you know, the reasoning behind this is that it doesn't show up in the fixed view table, but it does show up in the schema here. But the fact that this isn't dynamically populated leads to you having to manually configure these if anything ever changes.
Yeah, and the issue there is that the tables have to have a fixed schema, right? Because they're a table, but FME features don't have to have a fixed schema. Because
yeah, I was always under the impression that the schema you were shown here was being pulled from the features that were loaded into the view here.
No, it's being pulled from the exposed attributes in that particular section of the workspace.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I almost never use the table. The table view is nice, but it's the feature information window. That's where the real gold lies.
Absolutely.
Okay, I would like to address David's earlier question under, you know, how dynamically defined. I think one possibility is you can still define as parameter, allow user to pick the attributes they want to expose and work on. So that's a possibility. I think we did that in a couple workspaces.
Oh, you link those to parameters out to the interface?
Yeah. So yeah, you can say, hey, this is, but you cannot create that directly from the parameter setting on the navigator. You have to create a place where you have that reader or what have you to generate the parameter. Then it will be show up there. You can, then you can leverage that. So that's one place you can look into that.
Yeah, that should be getting better. I know for a while there we were limiting the number of types of parameters you could create out of nothing, just because to keep it simple, we thought we'd limit it to the ones you'd actually, you know, likely to use. And then the other method was just creating a parameter from the actual field in the transformer. Yeah, but I think we're allowing more flexibility now, and it's a work in progress, but we're allowing more flexibility to, you know, define ones off the cuff, especially as we've sort of changed the whole interface for parameters in the newest version. And we're making it a little bit more so you can add things like dividing lines. We're letting you sort of build your own your own interface graphically for your parameters. We're not locking you down to our interface, and we're giving you extra tools to make it look prettier.
Okay.
Which will help not only so much in, not so much really for the workspaces, but that's a big help in when you map it to server, right? Where all the parameter dialogue gets translated to a web page, right?
Yeah.
And people have more control over that. So yeah, there's a whole beautification project going on.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and if
I was
I
gonna
have,
ask-
well, I still have a few questions. I know the time is up, and I think this question for everyone, and just generally speaking, using FME cloud, and for most agencies and their data, if their data is not in the cloud, are there any benefits to use FME cloud, server cloud version of it, while majority of your data assets is located on premises?
The two advantages are one, pricing. You're not shelling out for the 14 grand or whatever server costs up front. You're buying it by the minute or by the month. So it's a way of dipping your fingers in the server world, or you know, it's a way of, if you don't think you have the throughput necessary, you can, you know, it's a different way of paying for it. The other advantage of cloud is that from a IT point of view, is the maintenance is all on us now instead of you. FME server can be more complex to maintain than FME desktop. Cloud basically takes care of all that for you. All the operating system security updates are automatically made.
Right.
All of the server updates are automatically made. Like all of these things, you know, are taken out of the hands of your IT department, especially if you're a smaller firm that doesn't really have an IT department. You don't have to go out and get one. Those are some advantages. And I guess the other advantage is if you have a process, or if you have like a distributed user base for your particular application. I mean, it's one thing to have, you know, all your in-house users using your workspaces and stuff, but what if you want to build processes that your customers can use directly? Then it makes sense to host them on FME Cloud, because it's easy to take that, turn around, use some more AWS tools to fire up you know, a web page and everything. I think I did one demo for one company where we just basically put a front end on 40 Mapper or something, and made a sort of batch tool. And using AWS tools, it took me all of about 5 minutes to create a web page served globally for this particular tool based on FME Cloud. And I was like, whoa, that was easy, right? And I'm not, you know, particularly versed in it, so I was just kind of winging it. So it gives you those advantages there as well. And actually, if you sort of want to see FME Cloud in action, I don't know if you've ever looked at the page that defines custom coordinate systems. If you have to define a custom coordinate system, we have a little web tool. That's all running on FME Cloud. So yeah.
Well, Dave, I understand all those, and most people, you know, these days understand the general benefits of using cloud. What I'm saying, in the case of ADA, where at this moment, at least, their databases, you know, roads and highways, and I'm talking about many of the other operational databases with which we work, you know, trying to connect silos, those are all on premises. So if you have a cloud FME server and the exposure of this, and also transport of data locally, you know, in on-premise and to the cloud in order to be processed, I think that causes inefficiency and also extra, you know, cost, right? This cost, factor that in, it might not be a good architecture, even though, and we might still enjoy some of the benefit you mentioned about, but overall architecture in terms of efficiency and performance might not be there.
Oh, definitely. And if you've got somebody, like I said, that big, where you're doing all of your work in-house on in-house data and for your in-house customers, yeah, then run in-house FME server as well.
Okay.
And then you've probably, quite frankly, you've probably got the budget for it as well. And you already have an IT department. So in that case, yeah, it makes sense to go on premise.
I was gonna
I know
ask,
Mark has, yeah, also always have thought in comments on cloud. So if you can chime in, that'd be great.
I was going to ask Harold, did you have any questions?
I do not. John actually asked all the questions that we've been
Whoa,
discussing.
you're
Is
like,
Carol in slow motion for you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that most
Okay.
definitely.
I'm glad we got that
Or-
one recorded.
or Harold,
Harold's, I don't know if he's still having microphone problems.
or you can just
No,
type.
No, I'm here. Sorry.
Oh,
yeah,
you're
I
back.
solved it a while
You're
ago.
here.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of funny. I just, kind of finally just said, okay, I'm just going to join on my phone instead of trying to have
That's too bad.
Anyway, it's the fun of all this remote work now, right? So, no, not a ton of questions. I thanking everybody for, setting this up. I think we will probably want to leverage, this is a resource. Caltrans has had FME server for a number of years now, but nobody, it's kind of funny. We find that the desktop users will get it and they go, okay, cool. They'll do some training and you never hear from them again. And it's like, well, you want to use the server. There's like a handful of things running on the server. So that's been our experience. And I think we're moving forward with some other, like getting into data governance and things like that. And I think that, FME is going to be a big part of that with some IT projects I'm seeing. So I kind of had to dust off. I'm not an expert by any means. I used, FME years ago and I've been a manager. It's like, oh God, there goes my technical skills. And, but I know that we're going to be using it. So figured I'd engage here and, you might see my staff or others from Caltrans joining in the future.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I might add there is you guys are probably, the desktop guys are probably solving their own problems on the desktop, and there's no reason that they wouldn't need to push that up to server. Just, it's possible that some of them are solving their own problems and they may have like the same problems, and that's an area where it might be nice to share.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, if it's just them doing the processing, it's not a big deal for them to just keep that workbench and like, oh, I just run this when I need to. And that's great. Where we're headed though, is more of an enterprise data environment where you want to make sure that the workflows are always the same for multiple users. And so that's, so we're maturing as an organization. We're a big organization. So I think it's an essential evolution of Caltrans's data management.
Well, that's the thing, a server will help you sort of standardize your data management or standardize your data transformation. But it might not be that the desktop guys want to be standardized. So you may face some pushback there, right? So.
Yeah, we definitely get the California kind of cowabunga surfer thing going on. I'm going to do my thing and ride my wave, and they don't care who else is out there. But they're getting their job done. They're getting their project delivery done in their respective districts. And that's where their focus is. And so, yeah. Anyway, anyway. I do have to jump to another meeting. I guess we're at 11, so I'm actually over. So, but yeah, I'll look for it. If you guys are going to do these, are you guys going to do these on a regular basis?
The third Thursday of the month. Yeah, just follow us on LinkedIn and
okay.
So next month, I think John's doing a presentation, and then we're looking for something for October, but we'll keep posting it up. So yeah, once a month, cool. Third Thursday, same time.
Just a quick thing, Eric, it's third Wednesday, but.
Third Wednesday. This is from the person that got the first one wrong and showed up like 2 hours after it happened. Yeah, I was supposed to have been moderating. It is what it is, right?
Got it. So I'll make a note of that, just so I already have it blocked out on my calendar.
And Harold, in the chat, Carol threw the LinkedIn group post, and we post there a couple weeks in advance, also like a day in advance of each presentation as well.
Okay, yeah, that's how I found you guys. So I think I'm already attached to that. But thank you. So third Wednesdays, 10 o'clock my time. Wednesdays.
Wednesdays,
cool.
yes. Yep.
Yeah. Got it. Well, I better jump, guys.
All right. Thanks for stopping.
We'll look forward to the next meeting. Take care.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah,
Welcome.
thanks.
Bye.
Bye.